Do you struggle with your own personal projects? Why is that? Well, as you watch me draw this today, I'm going to talk to you why there's actually a really heavy burden associated with you working on your personal projects. And these are sorely missed topics that nobody really talks about. I'm going to tell you why you just can't seem to get it done the way you want it to. So listen, starting out, you are definitely so excited to buckle down. You're so excited to make up your own comic, your own characters, your own games, your own this or that, right? But then something happens, doesn't it? And then it just doesn't go exactly according to plan. And that excitement you used to feel all of a sudden, whoo, just takes a big old nosedive, doesn't it? One of the things I noticed is that you are going to feel these eruptions of intense anxiety and your emotions going through it. And it's important to understand, like, why is that? Because if you're somebody like me who does a lot of freelance work, by the time that you sit down to do your own work, you know, that clarity that you have from being given the direction from somebody else, that all of a sudden, like, you didn't feel that way before. But now you feel it because you're working on your work. And then too, if you're somebody who can even do like fan art or create some artwork that's based in some other fandom, you can do that just fine, but not for your work. Something else happens. Everything gets all squirrely for you there, doesn't it? And here's the main reason why, is because when it's your own thought and your own idea and your own visions for it, you can't blame the IP. You can't be like, oh, well, that client's idea sucks, or like, oh, well, this just character from that IP just isn't good. You can't blame anybody. You have to be there and be accountable enough to be like, that is mine. That's my fault. That's my character. That's my vision. That's my idea. And so therefore, like, it has to be you. And that's what's so crippling about this. And this is where, as we talk through this, I'm gonna give you some hard strategies to deal with all this, by the way, too. So I'm not gonna leave you in the dark, but you need to understand at the outset that the hardest part of working on this is accepting that everything has to be about you. And therefore, everything based on the success or the failure of it, whether or not you continue and you actually accomplish it, or you don't and you drop it, and why it's so hard to continue on with that is the extreme accountability for it, because it's all about you. Because the last thing you want is for your idea to suck. And one of the biggest misunderstandings that you're going to think about as you're going through this process, and I'll guide you through how not to do, is you're going to think that, oh, well, because it's your project and therefore it sucks, then you suck. And that's not the case. And that's why I see a lot of creators fall into the trap of. I'm going to guide you out of that too. So if you felt this way before, because I don't want you to feel that way, I understand how hard it is to work on your own stuff, especially if you're doing this while you're working, especially if you're doing this while you have a job that you hate. And here's how you're going to accomplish what you were put on this earth to do. So right at the beginning, this is when you're typically the most enthused, right? And then when you start to actually create things for it, oh boy, doesn't go so well, does it? What happens there? You used to think, oh man, this is the best idea for this character. Oh God, it looks like that now? Or, oh man, I can't wait to create this environment. This environment sucks. What's so wrong with it? And the way I want you to think about this is that the issue isn't the idea, it isn't the execution, it isn't that you don't have a great concept, friend. It's just that that's the beginning. Y'all, I want to encourage you that if you're making your own personal project, you're currently laboring over what is the worst version of it, okay? Because it's Gen 1. And even if you're somebody that's maybe redone a character 10 times, awesome. That is exactly how it needs to go and should go. I want to give you a real visual example of this. So everybody, check out right up here on screen. This is the original concept art for Woody from Toy Story. And y'all, when you take a look at a lot of this stuff, this is freaky as crap, isn't it? Like, look at this guy up over here. This looks like some Five Nights at Freddy crap, doesn't it? But here's the thing. That's okay. They didn't accept that as like, oh God, we suck. Like, let's just shut down this entire production. This is a terrible idea. No, because if they did that, what would have happened? 3D animation would have never taken off without Toy Story. So if you accept that your Gen 1 is gonna be the only one, then that's completely unrealistic. And what that's doing is it's forcing false expectations onto you. So instead, if you practice a little less commitment into the first iterations of what you're doing and just accept it as part of a process that you're gonna need to go through, and we'll step you through that process in this video today so that you can actually get to what the best version is. Because what I see a lot of creators do is that they get really hunkered down into what they're currently doing and how they currently made it, instead of just exploring that and just saying, that's not it. That's just a possibility of what it is. Whether it's a character, whether it's a story, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's an environment, department, whether it's anything. That's just Gen 1. And this also applies to anyone that wants to start an art business too. Like the way that I used to do my freelance work is by no means anything like the way I approach it now. But again, that was Gen 1. Now I'm on like Gen 10. And so I want to release you from the expectation it's got to be great at the outset or that it's not going to take you some time. And we'll talk about that later too. But just at this, it's going to suck. You might be worried, oh, what if it sucks? Good, it will. It's going to suck. But if you push through that, you'll be amazed at what will come out on the other side. Is this your problem? Now let me ask you this. Do you enjoy amusement parks? Because listen, when you're making your own IP, your own product, you're gonna go on a roller coaster ride, and here's what it is. So I actually found this a while ago. I'm gonna put this up on screen for you right now, but this is called the artistic slope. And this generally describes every single peak and valley that you're gonna go through as an artist. Here's basically how it works, is that at the beginning of your project, this is when you're at the highest enthusiasm level. And this is when you are most excited to actually get going on that. Everything is great and everything's amazing and everything is grand and you've got loads of motivation, right? But this is also where you are the least informed. You don't know how things are and you don't know how it's gonna turn out and you haven't done much for it either. So you're actually operating from a place of what's called blind optimism. So then you start to labor towards it and you're like, well, it's kind of going okay. And, I'm making some progress towards it. It's all right. And this is when you enter the next phase, which is when you're starting to gain a little bit more information about it, but you're not quite there yet. And then inevitably, you start to go downhill. And this is when you hit this place of what's called informed pessimism. And then you eventually get to this point, and generally in the middle of a project or after you've done some work, where you just feel like crap. And is this generally where you tend to get stuck? Because this is really lovingly called the valley of death. Because this is where most creators are just totally gonna dump out. This is when you're gonna stop uploading to YouTube for your channel. This is when you're gonna stop putting up new products on your Etsy shop. This is when you're gonna stop creating characters. You're gonna stop your comic all the time, because you're entrenched in what's called informed pessimism. You've gone through the stages, you've gone through what isn't working, you know what some roadblocks are that you didn't anticipate at the beginning, because again, you were uninformed with it. And then now you're stuck here. And again, the danger zone here is that this is where most artists are not going to persist. So the way that I want to encourage you though is by the next phase of the artistic slope, which is when you're going to start to, again, push through that and continue on through that, because you remember that it's just your worst version of it right now. It's not the final version of it. When you continue to labor through that, you're going to get to the next place of acceptance into it, where you're going to look at what you started with and where you currently are. And you're going to realize like, okay, this isn't quite what I thought it would be, but I'm getting happier with it. And then you'll eventually end with like, okay, this isn't as good as I thought it was going to be, but it's way better than I thought it was going to be. And that's a place where you can be satisfied with. This is where you feel accomplished with it too, friend. But I also want you to notice is how this is a steep curve down. And what does that relate to? Your motivation, friend. So the way that you're going to get through this is accepting where you are uninformed. And when you become informed, that's generally where you dump out. So don't let those moments of pessimism leak into it, because it might destroy something that's really deep, meaningful, and is going to impact the world like I know that you're as well. Now let's enter our major struggle zone that you're going to come to, is that when you initially create some type of an idea, you're going to create a timeline with it too. You're going to be like, oh, well, I want to be in the art industry in the next 6 months. Or, hey, I want to make my first comic and I want to create like the whole first volume this month. Or I want to start freelancing and I want to be able to just quit my job in 3 months. And one of the things that I want to let you know is that when you're working on your own personal project, and it might even be like, hey, I want to like launch my game by next year, is that inevitably it's not going to follow that schedule. It just won't. That's just not the kindness that the world is going to offer you. And it will always take more time than you think it will. And that's not a bad thing, friend. It's really not. But you're going to associate time with failure. And here's why. Because you're going to take a look at time as a scarce resource. And that is not accurate, friend. Okay. The way I've come to understand this and I want to share with you is like this: focusing on time alone and the amount of time that you're investing into it is a really poor way to judge it. Instead, what I would urge you to do is to look at what is a more valuable resource that you have direct control over, which is your focus. There are so many people, just as an example, that will go ahead and draw like fingers for hours and hours and hours and hundreds of fingers, but they don't do anything with it. And then and therefore it doesn't help them draw their landscape because they drew 10,000 fingers. It just doesn't make sense. And so the thing I want to let you know is that you can control your focus. That is the most valuable resource. If you can actually have 1 hour of sustained focus versus 4 to 5 hours of moderately unfocused work, you've accomplished more than that person did. And sometimes this can even be like 15 to 30 minutes of time when you can capitalize on those pockets of time. If you can capitalize on when you have time and using your focus for it, it's going to produce a much better, more satisfactory result for you. But at the outset, just realize this, it's definitely going to take more time than you think. And if you're worried about that, and sometimes people will be like, oh, Sean, well, do you know how old I am? Do you know how much time that's gonna take? I'm just gonna tell you the same thing I've always told everybody. Yeah, the same amount of time as if you don't do it. And the same amount of time as if you don't sit down and try it. And the same amount of time it'll take you to actually feel good about what you're doing and accomplish something and to accomplish your mission in this life. Or you can just let that time go and give in to those feelings of anxiety and hopelessness. And then all that's gonna net you is an older age where you feel even more disappointed with less time to do something about it. Which one do you wanna do? Now, at the outset of why you wanted to create this personal project, I'm gonna say that it comes from a really meaningful place, doesn't it? And that's a really wonderful thing. And this will come from your life experiences. It'll come from some of the things that you've struggled with, some things that you've noticed, some just raging idea that you've always had. Tell me what down below, what is yours? What is your passion project that you have in mind? Because I'm sure it's amazing. I'm sure you have a wonderful contribution that you want to make to the world and to art in general, right? The problem though with that is that that tends to box you into caring about it way too much. And this also relates to why it's so hard for you just to labor over that and to attempt to create it and to go through and force yourself through the awful iterations of it, is because you're so emotionally invested into it that it blinds you to what has to be done to really bring about the best version of it. And let me just package this all together with a word that you're familiar with. It's self-sabotage. Because you care so much about it, you're gonna sabotage the efforts you need to make. You're gonna sabotage the time you need to invest into it. You're gonna sabotage yourself because of the fact that you're so emotionally invested into this. And you will sabotage yourself, not because you don't care, but because you care way too freaking much. And so what I see this represented as is you'll go ahead and you create one concept and say, that's it. That's the one I'm going with. But the thing that we often say in the art world, especially in concept art, is that your first idea is your worst idea. That's why it's so necessary for you to not do 1, 2, 3 versions of everything, especially if it's your own IP, but to do 10 to 20. Y'all, there's a reason why if you ever go to school for design, you ever go to school for concept art, it's not unusual for you to have 20 to 50 iterations of the same thing. It's because you need those options. It's because you need to practice this ability to emotionally remove yourself from the project and just objectively assess, is that really going to convey it in the way that I want it to? Even just as an example, I've recorded some of my videos. I just got done earlier today recording a video that I've had to record 3 times because it didn't convey my message in the right way that I wanted it to. So one of the big things that I don't think anybody ever talks about, but I learned through Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being, is that when you're overindulging into your emotions and you're being a glutton for your emotional state, is that you're actually clogging up all of the channels that your creativity can naturally flow through. Because your creativity doesn't just dissipate, you block it. And it's something that you kind of voluntarily do through over-observing a part of you that's not helping you, and you're under-observing the part that is a natural force and state of being. Your creative being, that is. And because too, you will care too much about what you're doing while you're doing it, a problem that you're gonna run into is that you're gonna start to identify with the undesirable results. Oh, well, it sucks because I suck, because I'm not capable of it, because I'm not talented enough, because I shouldn't do this, because my mom and dad told me I should have been a plumber instead of being an artist. All of that, it's going to surface, it's gonna come up. And you placing an identity label on your work because you care too much, it's never gonna help you accomplish that. But my friend, you owe it to yourself and the world to push that IP out so that other people can enjoy it and you can impact people the same way that you've been impacted, right? Now, a real dark reality I want to let you know is how you can expect your project to really suck. And I don't mean the word, I mean the thought of doing it. Have you ever started up a project that's just for yourself? And I feel this sometimes too with my client work too, to be honest, where you were really excited about it and you just had endless enthusiasm for it. You were so pumped up for it. And then inevitably, this is what happens, is that the more you labor for that craft, the more that you feel that it devolves into work. It used to be a passion, and now you're just feeling like, oh, I can't bring myself to do it. It's a total slugfest to do it every single day, or to try and hit that target, or you're looking at your calendar and you're like, this is the release date of, my first webcomic, and it brings you intense dread and anxiety. And now you're feeling like, oh man, this one's beautiful idea, this one's beautiful concept, this one's beautiful project, it's now tainted. And why is that? It's because you have a corrupted focus, all right? Oftentimes when we're in the trenches, we're in the middle of something, and the reason why most people and artists especially tend to just die off with their personal projects in that valley of death stage we talked about earlier is because you're too focused on what you haven't done, what you need to do, what's supposed to be done, what your expectations are. And you're wrestling with all that. But here's the thing, you're also completely neglecting everything that you have done, the work that you have accomplished. At the core of this is that you lost confidence in yourself, is that you lost confidence in your ability to complete it and to see that your efforts matter. But if you actually, again, have like a list that you can go back to and be like, whoa, I have done all this. So I've done this with people in my mentorship, for example, and it always makes them feel so much better when they can actually have an artifact list and be like, whoa, look at all these steps that I've done. Everything is great. And the reason why this is so effective is that it teaches you to pivot into fun and pivot more into recognizing your accomplishments rather than your deficiencies, rather than the gaps in what you have to do. So what if you started to focus on that instead of what you weren't doing? Could you do that? Now, this topic I'm approached with you right now is really huge. And one of the things that you might be thinking right now is that you doing your personal project or not, it only affects you. Hey, right? I mean, whatever, you've got a family, not gonna affect my kids, not gonna affect my spouse, not gonna affect my family, right? But I wanna tell you why you're wrong. I wanna tell you why you actually completing this project that means something to you and you not accomplishing it is gonna make everybody around you suffer. Because by you not investing into yourself, you're harming yourself and everybody around you is gonna suffer. You're gonna cut yourself and bleed all over everybody in a metaphorical sense. Because if you took the time and you actually accomplished this, what would you feel about it? You would feel happier, you would feel more confident, you would feel more accomplished, wouldn't you? What that will do is prevent you from having your mood poisoning everybody around you. It will not infect your interactions with everybody. Imagine if you are grumpier, if you're a grouch, if you're snappier. Why? Because you're not living your best life, because you're not accomplishing the things that you want to, because you're not taking the smallest steps even towards you doing the things that you wanted to. So you thinking that it only affects you is wholly wrong. There's a big, massive communal bleed effect that you're going to feel by you abandoning what you're doing. And also too, like, let's not forget that if you do this and it does work out and it does pay off, quite literally, you having a wealthier version of you and a happier version of you, how does that not impact everybody? How does that not impact your future? How does that not impact your ability to provide for your family or start a family? And what I want to let you know about this is that if you don't invest into yourself, everybody pays. But if you do invest into yourself, then everybody around you wins. Which one do you want? Now, I bet that project that you have, that you're going to use for the betterment of everybody around you, you would love to try and figure out, hey, how do I make this work? How could I potentially evolve this? How could I turn this maybe into a business? But maybe you're sitting out there like, well, how do I do that? And God, it's so complicated and it seems so hard. And I've heard this and I've heard that, and it's so overwhelming. What do I do, Sean? Well, this is you, friend. I made an entire quick start video for you right here. It's gonna get you off the ground started quick. And if this helps you, please share it with somebody that you know. Thanks, and see you next time.